Hello, AP language students. You are looking at pictures of Charlie Parker, one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time. Charlie Parker was born in 1920, died in 1955, and was one of our greatest musicians of all time. As you can tell, he's a saxophone player and was well known for being a pretty incredible composer and also for being a guy who could play really, really fast. His nickname is Bird. Originally was known as Yardbird, but became known as Bird. And the piece that I'm going to show you in a second here is from Ralph Ellison, one of our most famous writers, who's written a piece basically to try and figure out why Charlie Parker was nicknamed Bird. So we're going to take a look at that right now. If you don't mind, I want to read you an article written by Ralph Ellison, which is called On Bird, Bird Watching in Jazz. Ellison is one of our most famous American writers, and he wanted to talk about Charlie Parker. And one of the main things that he wanted to do is he wanted to explore why Charlie Parker has the nickname that he has and where it came from. And there's a pretty cool piece here that I want to read to you. And the point I'm going to make is actually quite small. I'm going to take a long time to actually get to a point that's not that big of a point. But here we go. Oddly enough, while several explanations are advanced as to how Charles Parker Jr. became known as Bird, Yardbird in an earlier metamorphosis, none is conclusive. There is, however, overpowering internal evidence that whatever the true circumstances of his ornithological designation, it had little to do with the chicken yard. Randy roosters and operatic hens are familiars to fans of an animated cartoons, but for all the pathetic comedy of his living, and despite the crabbed and constricted character of his style, Parker was a most inventive melodist. In birdwatchers' terminology, a true songster. This failure in exposition of Bird's legend is intriguing, for nicknames are indicative of a change from a given to an achieving identity, whether by rise or fall, and they tell us something of the nicknamed individual's interaction with his fellows. Thus, since we suspect that more of legend is involved in his renaming than Mr. Reisner's title indicates, let us at least consult Roger Torrey Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds for a hint as to why, during a period when most jazzmen were labeled cats, someone hung the bird on Charlie. Let us note, too, that legend originally meant the story of a saint, and that saints were often identified with symbolic animals. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Here's the last paragraph of the piece. The mockingbird, Mimus polyglottos, is more promising. Peterson informs us that its song consists of long successions of notes and phrases of great variety, with each phrase repeated a half-dozen times before going on to the next. That mockingbirds are excellent mimics who adeptly imitate a score or more species found in the neighborhood, and that they frequently sing at night, a description which not only comes close to Parker's way with the saxophone, but even hints at a trait of his character. For although he usually sang at night, his playing was characterized by velocity, by long continued successions of notes and phrases, by swoops, bleats, echoes, rapidly repeated bebops, rebopped bebops, by mocking mimicry of other jazzmen's styles, and by interpolations of motifs from extraneous melodies, all of which added up to a dazzling display of wit, satire, burlesque, and pathos. Further, he was an expert at issuing his improvisations from the dense brush as from the extreme treetops of his harmonic landscape, and there was, without doubt, as irrepressible a mockery in his personal conduct as his music. So Ralph Ellison does a whole bunch of cool things with this piece, but since I'm not here, we can't talk about all of them. The big one that I want to talk to you about is this sentence right here, which begins with "for although." And if you take a look at it, you'll see that the sentence begins here and ends all the way down here at the word pathos. This sentence is 61 words long, and it is an example of one of the types of sentences that we are going to talk about in our lesson today. This is an example of what's called a cumulative sentence, also known as a loose sentence. Ultimately, it's super, super long, but more than that, it's something that adds to the style of the piece. Now let's take a look at it again. For although he usually sang at night, his playing was characterized by velocity, by long continued successions of notes and phrases, by swoops, bleats, echoes, rapidly repeated rebop bebops, by mocking mimicry of other jazzmen styles, and by interpolations of motifs from extraneous melodies, all of which added up to a dazzling display of wit, satire, burlesque, and pathos. This sentence, to me, is very clearly intended to sound like jazz. It's long and it goes on and it goes in different directions here and there. It mimics the kind of style that Parker played in. And I think it's one of the cooler sentences specifically for this type of writing. Okay, now that we've looked at this cumulative sentence, I want you to go back to Google Classroom and take a look at the next part of your Style Day lesson. Thanks.